Hey everyone, Ben Cooper Radio, episode number 123. Apologies, Rachel and I were not on last week's show, but I have been moving house, and as I'm sure anyone that's moved house can appreciate, it takes a lot of effort, time's all over the place, you don't have Wi-Fi, so I said to Rachel, do you mind if we record next week? I've got a guest show lined up, it's all good, but don't fret. Me and Rachel are back, and we've got some of your questions. Rachel, how on earth are you? Hello.
Hello, how are you? I'm very well. Settling in back in Sydney. I think I'm now into week 4 after the Christmas holidays. So yeah, settling in, and it's nice to see the contrast in weather here. I'm sat here in a singlet. It's actually, it's not too hot today. It's probably about 22, 23 degrees. I sat in a park for an hour earlier on my laptop, which is quite nice. And you're there in cold Britain, wrapped up.
I'm sat here wearing thick jogging bottoms, jumper, vest, t-shirt, coat. You couldn't get any more disparity between us. It's freezing at the moment. But anyway,
it snowing?
It's snowing a little bit, just like little bits.
Oh, I love that.
It is nice, yeah, don't get me wrong, but the new house I've gone to, it shows you how heat efficiency can be really important in the house, because we just flip the heating in our new house, and like 10 minutes later it's beautiful, it's warm, it's even. Where my old house, there's like 2 spots that are warm and that's it. And those 2 spots are not where I work, unfortunately. I'll tell you what, because I've moved house and everything, I don't really have anything to announce in my world. It feels quite vanilla and bland, if I'm honest.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with vanilla. Vanilla ice cream's the best. Sorry, I digress. Well, I don't really have that much going on either, to be honest. Obviously, I'm dieting for a shoot still. That's in 2 weeks' time. I've had, as people have probably seen on social media, I've had a very bad flare-up of my IBS over the past 2 weeks, which has been very frustrating. Mentally, it has been more frustrating, and I think I posted. I've never really talked publicly, certainly on social media, about my IBS. And, I've only really talked about it really in one podcast that we did back in June or July last year. And so the cat is now well and truly out of the bag. I sort of put up a before and after photo of what my tummy usually looks like, and then what happens when I have a flare-up of IBS. Now, sometimes it could be certain foods that I eat. Sometimes it could be stress. In this case, I have no idea. I ate out at a couple of restaurants. I asked for, no onion, no garlic. Who knows if they put it in my dish? Who knows if my steak was basted in it? I don't know. But either way, I've had 2 weeks of a lot of frustration, a lot of pain, a lot of bloating. But the good news is it's now gone. So for all you IBS sufferers out there who have the severe bloating, just know that it does pass and you will get over it. But just keep searching and be your own detective. And Ben and I have talked a lot about IBS on previous podcasts, so make sure you check those out.
It's a really important and very common disorder, and it's something that's, I think I've come to realise, is very multifaceted over the years. When we first started understanding more about inflammatory foods and the way foods affect the gut lining, thus the immune system, and then the organs after that. As a result of that, and using that approach with clients, you then realise that, that's kind of like 80-85% of the battle, and then there's 15 to 20% where you've got this kind of stress input and variables that sometimes are quite unknown and quite hard to detect. And that's when you have to start to say, right, well, there's more to this picture. We've got to look at stress, environmental toxins, hydration, who knows, all manner of stuff. And perhaps it's something that I might look to explore with a guest at some point on the show. Someone, so if anyone follows a different practitioner in the health and fitness sphere and feels they are very well versed in IBS, maybe even IBS in terms of its other symptoms, so not the food-related IBS, and we could maybe do a special podcast on that again and delve in with a really top-quality expert to kind of delve into all the nooks and crannies of it.
I think that would be a wicked idea. Like, you know, when I went to see I'm under the care of a gastroenterologist in the UK, and the way that he described it to me was think of it as a scale as 1 to 100, and 100 being 100 points. And when you accumulate 100 points, that's when your tummy flares up. So things like food can attribute certain points. So, you know, if your food is good, it may only contribute 20 points. If your food is off and certain things slip into your diet, it may accumulate to 60 points. And then on top of that, if you have a lack of sleep, a lack of sleep and extreme stress or a stressful environment, and that could be from work, it could be from relationships, it could be financial stress, that can easily tip you over to 100. And the thing is, when I talk about these things, we're not talking about chronic, well, we are, but we're also not talking about chronic condition here, because I can tell you now, like I got up this morning at 4 a.m. to get to training for Wimp to Warrior. We had a 6 a.m. training session, and my tummy hasn't been right today because I only had about 5.5 hours sleep last night. So it can be that quick, and it can be that sensitive to things that, I mean, people think that you're making a big deal out of it when you ask for no onion and no garlic when you're out at dinner. But the truth is that when you have a condition like this, whether it be IBS, Crohn's, celiac, or any other disorder whatsoever, if you know that you have certain foods that inflame you, don't eat them. And if you are going to eat them, know that you're going to suffer the consequences.
I think this is a brilliant point, actually, that I don't think we've touched on, in that there's a build-up scale with all this kind of stuff, and that's when it becomes very difficult to attribute where and how and what the trigger was. You know, you've just mentioned that there's various things could kind of build up. It's like stress in the bathtub analogy. You know, you put a bit of stress in, and all it takes is you dropping a glass on the kitchen floor or something to make you flip and go mad and, you know, kind of lose it and feel overwhelmed. And it's just that last millimetre of water that overflowed the bath. And I think this is why we kind of impress on people on this podcast with the information we give, in that do what you can wherever you can, and it becomes even more important where you know that there are symptoms that you get commonly as an individual. Like if you're someone, for example, that eats gluten and just gets a tiny bit of issue, you know, whatever, then that's fine. Like have it now and again, you make that personal choice. But if you're someone that is autoimmune reactive, has symptoms that they want at bay, that's something that you need to say, and let's say gluten is reactive in this instance, that's something that has to be out 100%. Like, yeah. and we have to qualify. And I suppose I use a different example, and you know, I don't think she'd mind me mentioning this. My girlfriend Lizzie, you know, she's kind of in a similar position with foods, and there's a lot that's reactive in her diet, and she can be quite reactive to histamine containing foods, which is very problematic, because histamine is the exact same analogy you used, and it's like a build-up thing. You know, you'll have some foods that are moderate in histamine, they don't create much of a reaction, you just have another food that creates a little bit of histamine, and bang, like the flare-up happens, there's a full-scale blowout, and you're like, what did I eat? Like, I didn't eat anything that commonly is a trigger, and it's purely a build-up thing. So I think if anyone can take anything away from our little ramble here, is that do what you can. If you know there's factors, do it, because at some point you never know where it's going to be the tipping point. Like I've struggled to keep on top of my diet with the house move, you know, being fragmented, not being able to cook food, not having a proper kitchen, not being able to sleep consistency, and all those things have had a real effect on how I can perform as an individual every day, how clear my thought pattern is, because I'm totally dysregulated. Now that's a short-term environment that I know is coming, but a lot of people live their life that way. A lot of people live their life in a fragmented fashion, and that's why, you know, it's important to have regimes, you know, always food in the house that you can eat, get to sleep on time, go to the gym the same time of the week. This routine allows us to keep our body, or on top of our body, in our health and performance.
For sure, and I definitely think I'll just add in there that, you know, you were talking about the 1 millimetre of water that just spills over the top, and I can tell you now, it is certainly a case of the straw that breaks the camel's back with whatever condition that you're dealing with. Obviously, I'm talking from an IBS perspective. I mean, I dropped an egg on the floor the other day and I burst into tears. And I spent most of the weekend sulking,
Exactly.
like full on sulking on the couch, huddled in a ball under a doona when it was with air conditioning on, when it was like 26 degrees and sunny outside, because I didn't want to see the world. I was genuinely throwing my toys out of the pram, having a damn good sulk. And as it happens, on Monday, I actually felt a little better. Why? Because I rested.
Yeah.
I was forced to rest, and I watched some stupid documentaries on. Oh, actually, just I'll mention this. Has anyone seen The Fall? It's about a police. It's like an investigation around murders in Belfast, I think it is. But it's a really good show. So that's what I was watching on the weekend. The Fall. Sidetrack there. Anyway, before we begin our podcast, I'm just going to turn a light on here because I'm very aware that it's 8 p.m. here and it's getting dark. So before it goes pitch black, I'm going to turn a light on. Bear with me 1 second.
Well, that's fine, because while Rachel is dancing about our office in her hot pants and I'm sitting here in my Arctic all-weather gear, we will kick off the show. Now, I had a look at the questions that had obviously come in for the podcast, and do you know what? Very recently there's been a lot of basic questions come back in, and on podcast 117 I did a diet back to basics episode, and it seems like it spurred a lot more of these kind of basic questions. Now, for people that have kind of like picked up the podcast there and travelled with us to podcast 123, please go back and listen to a lot of the information, because you're then going to see where we've come on, because we've almost come on a journey with this podcast. We've evolved the podcast and the information, and we're not trying to go over old ground. But one of the things that was apparent is there was a lot of questions in my inbox for the podcast where people are not being self-reflective enough. People are sitting there and going, right, I've got this problem, I've hit a plateau, or I've got a symptom and something's not right, and it's almost a what can I do scenario, but then someone lists the scenario, and I kind of sit there and think, well, you've just answered your own question, but it's either you need some kind of self-validation from me, you almost need the person, myself in this instant, to say, yes, you need to go do that. But we talked about confidence the other week on the podcast, and this is a huge factor in doing all of this. If you listen to loads of people saying the same thing about a particular health topic that you're trying to get your head around, have the confidence to go with it. And if it doesn't work for 4 weeks, then change it. But I think you'll realise what I'm trying to get at with some of today's questions, in that some people need to have their own self-resolve and go for what they want to achieve, because the answers are already staring at them in the face. Or there are some scenarios where people just need to bite the bullet and go and pay to get a coach to solve the problem for them. Whether that be £100, £200, £300 investment. This is your health. This is your health we are talking about, and it's an investment worth making. Anyway, right, the question. So first two questions, I'm going to read it to Rachel because they're kind of her bag. I don't have the name of this lady here, which is unfortunate. Hi Ben and Rachel, I'm quite a new listener. I came across Ben at last year's Scottish Fitness Expo, SFN, and was struck by someone who was talking sense and not trying to tell me I could take a magic pill and build the perfect body overnight. I've listened to all the Q&A podcasts between the two of you, and I'm working to educate myself. My question today is about strength training for women, but first a bit of background. I'm 5'7" and have an endomorph body shape with a stocky bottom half and a slimmer top half. I wear a UK dress size 14 and don't think I look like I'm particularly overweight. However, in January 2013 I was 13 stone 12 with a 42% body fat as measured on my home scale. I realised that no matter how far I could run or how much I could lift, this was completely unhealthy, and finally decided to get some focus on improving my health. It has been a very slow process, but I am now 12 stone 9 with 33% body fat. I lost and gained a couple of times in the last year as I tried to work out what the best diet choices for me were. I've now stabilised on 1500 calories and a 25% carb, 40% protein, 35% fat diet. I eat a gluten-free diet of lean meat, lots of veg and eggs, and I rarely eat gluten-free substitutes like bread and pasta. My diet is habit now and I don't feel any difficulty in maintaining it. Exercise though is still something I'm working on. I have a reasonably active life and average 16,000 steps per day before I do any additional exercise or workouts. My current exercise program is as follows: 2.5 5k runs a week, mid-level intensity. I enjoy running and would happily do more, but I am cautious about chronic cardio. The running I do now is mostly for my mental health, as I believe getting outside and away from the gym and on my own a few times a week keeps my stress levels down and I feel big benefit from it. I have been doing strong lift 5x5 program 4 times a week and can now squat 80 kilo, deadlift 95 kilo and bench 35. This workout only takes me 30 minutes in my home gym. The problem is I'm now not able to progress because I'm eating at a deficit, so don't have sufficient energy to build more muscle and lift more. My goal is to get my body fat to a healthy level of around 25%. I don't really care about weight, but I would think losing another stone would be a reasonable goal. Sorry, she did have her name here. Her name's Jenny. I missed out part of the question. So, to my question. I believe I need to continue to eat at a deficit if I am to reduce my body fat, but I'm now confused at what to do with exercise and in particular my strength training. I feel I need to look at reducing the intensity and perhaps increasing volume, but at the same time that feels like I'm going backwards. I really enjoy strength training, so I'm completely open to spending more time on it or doing split routines. I work out at home and have a bench, squat rack and a good selection of weight plates. I also have lighter dumbbells plus a couple of kettlebells. Any advice you can give on what next steps should be would be greatly appreciated. One last thing, I have an underactive thyroid as a result of an autoimmune condition. I was diagnosed 10 years ago and am on stable meds. I supplement selenium to support my thyroxine and take rhodiola rosea to support adrenal function. Thanks again for any advice, Jenny.
I think this is a great question because it's a question that I see all of the time in some shape or form. So I'm basically going to go through what you've written, and I've just made a couple of notes on some pretty things that stand out to me basically. So first of all, at 5'7", at 13 stone 12, yes, this does need to be looked at. However, at 42% body fat, I wouldn't take that as gospel if it's being on a home scale. But, you know, just a side note here, a lot of people do say, oh, well, you shouldn't look at the scale because it doesn't mean anything. Well, the truth is that when you're 5'7" and that 13 stone 12, it actually does mean something, and that you are quite overweight at that level, no matter actually how much muscle you have. So, what was I written here? The other thing that stood out to me, 1,500 calories is what I would consider still a very low calorie diet. You know, I've just broken down a calories. So if we're looking here at 40% protein, it's roughly about 150 grams of protein a day, which is okay. That would be roughly 58 to 59 grams of fat, which I would consider very low for somebody of her activity level and her height, and 90 grams of carbs per day, which I would also consider fairly low. So running twice a week. Now, I actually, I actually did a post on social media about this and how to incorporate running into a training program for fat loss. And one of the things that was quite clear is that people are very addicted to running, and they use it as people say, well, I like to get out and run because it's good for my, my stress levels, and it's good to get out in the open. I 100% agree with that. However, just be aware that that's not self-justification for an addiction, because running is such an addictive activity. A lot of people do say, oh, but it makes me feel good. Yeah, sure, it makes you feel good, but is it actually doing you any benefit in the long run? So in terms of running, I wouldn't necessarily take it out of Jenny's program, but I would certainly reduce the volume just in the short term, because I feel that looking at all of this, she has got a fair bit of stress going on. So this is a classic case in a nutshell of overtraining and undereating. Now, I say overtraining because there's a fair bit of cardio in there. If she's doing 1,600 steps a day and she's doing 2 runs a week, with a 5x5 program, that's not a lot of volume in your training to elicit any form of metabolic response. So when I'm looking at this, I would say that Julie's goal is fat loss, but she also needs to be looking at building muscle rather than strength at the moment. So when we're writing a training program, it's cool to focus on strength. That's fine. But you can't always train for strength for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. You need to have periods where I usually put it into 4-week blocks where we'll do 4 weeks of volume training, and then we'll go back to 4 weeks of more intensity training. So it's slightly lower reps and heavier weights. So whatever you're doing, Julie, you just need to do something different. And I think a lot of people overcomplicate this. So when we're looking at somebody who's on a strength training program and a very low calorie diet, I wouldn't automatically boost their calories really high and put them onto a high volume training program, because that's very stressful to the body. And by looking at this, Julie's already in a stressful situation. So if I can give any form of advice, it would be to very slowly start increasing your food intake and change your training program straight away. So in terms of a training program, for somebody like Julie, I would look at something like an upper, lower, and total body split. So training, lifting a minimum of 3 times a week, doing 1 run. So I'm not completely removing her running, 1 run and 1 walk, because that way she's still going to the gym and she's still got that volume of training, but it's not quite as intense. You know, when we're looking at running, I think for somebody like her, she's under eating for the volume that she is doing.
Yeah, Rachel, I don't know if in your calculations you actually had a look at her calorie intake and her BMR, but I've just scribbled out the maths. No, so at 82 kilos, at her resting BMR, I calculate it roughly around 1,800 calories. Now, she's only eating 1,500 calories. Now, she's already eating at around 10 to 15% deficit without any exercise. But she's exercising a lot. She's exercising 16,000 steps a day, running twice a week, and training 4 times a week. That means I calculate her BMR with exercise at 2,800 calories. That means she's eating at a calorie deficit at 40%. That's dangerous.
Yeah, and that's very stressful on a body, and that's what I was about to come and get to now, is that Jenny already knows that she's taking rhodiola for adrenal function. So she's already caught on somewhere along the line that she's educated herself that actually perhaps her adrenals are not too healthy right now, and we've got to look at why that is. There's nothing wrong with high volume exercise in somebody who is eating enough food. And this is what I'm trying to get at here. You can exercise as much as you want if you're getting the energy coming in. You can burn as much as you like, but you've got to keep feeding yourself. And when you get to a certain level, and particularly when you've already got thyroid issues, when we add a lot of stress on top of that, we have upregulation of the sympathetic nervous system. That causes all sorts of problems in the body. And so we do have to look at, like, my first thing would be rest and relaxation. We've got to reduce everything here. Shorter workouts. So she is already doing short workouts at 30 minutes, but I just increase the volume of those workouts and do, I guess, more metabolic type work. And very slowly increase food intake. So when we're looking at somebody like this, their biggest fear is often eating more food, for the fear of actually getting fat. So what you do, Jenny, I think I keep calling you Julie. Jenny, is very slowly start to increase your calories. Now, by that I mean it may be an extra tablespoon of olive oil on your salad at lunchtime. It may mean an extra tablespoon of butter that you cook your your fish in the evening. It may be that you have a banana post-training because you're probably not eating enough carbs post-training. It may be that you add an extra 1/4 cup of rice, and I'm talking on a weekly basis now. So very, very slowly incremental loading to boost your calories, because that way it gives your body time to adapt without you getting fat.
Let me kind of share something a little bit more personal here, in that one of the hardest things with the whole diet battle is that when we go on a certain journey, we're scared to redirect that journey because of what might happen. So I used to be obese, and losing all the weight was a very empowering process, but it was also very scary because you kind of sit there and think, well, what happens afterwards? And whether you're an individual or a coach, you need to bear this psychology in mind, in that when I lost all the weight, I'm then sat there thinking, I am no way going back to where I was before. Like no chance in hell. So when I have to go and then change things to accommodate for my new alignment of my goals, I have to do things really slowly. And my initial weight loss was quite rapid. I lost 4 stone in 4 months. It flew off me. So I was used to quick results. But my results were never going to stay like that. It's impossible. It's unmaintainable. And also my goals of changing now to more like building more muscle and appearing more aesthetic is a very slow process. So I battled for ages this kind of concept of eating more and training more and trying to train harder and build muscle, because it was like, well, I can't eat more because I can't get fat. And the lesson here is, and Rachel explained it perfectly, in that you have to take things slowly. If you're at 1500 calories now, and I've just told you I think you should be eating 2800 calories to perform optimally, you can't go that distance in a quick amount of time. You've got to take it slowly. So like 60 to 80 calories a week, build it up. And this is where patience comes in the process, because not many people have the patience to increase their diet by 80 calories every 4, 5, 6 days, and do it slowly, because it means you've got to count things. It means you can't, not to say you can't go out of the weekend and have some fun, but you've got to maintain a bit of discipline. You've got to get yourself some places. And it's the same kind of scenario with kind of IBS and autoimmune conditions, all this kind of stuff. There needs to be a period of real diligence to get your body to a level where it's healthy, relaxed, and in a healthy place to continue a different goal, albeit fat loss or muscle gain. And then you can kind of enjoy that flexibility again. And in this scenario, I think Jenny does need to build herself back up very slowly in a controlled fashion.
And I've never been obese, but I will say, even from my perspective, and obviously I have to get very lean for various different events, but I spend most of my time roughly at the same body fat percentage year round. However, there are times in that year where I try to push my metabolic capacity so that I can eat more. I love food, so there are times when even I know, and like Ben, you'll be the same, where there are times where I second guess myself, and I really think, God, like, I'm stuffing calories in right now. I'm probably on like 3,000. Well, I'm not right now because I'm dieting, but but my peak, I'm like 3,200 calories. And I tell you what, getting it all in is hard, and it's a mental battle, even at the level that we're at. But we have the understanding behind it that this is why we're doing something, and it works every time, but there is still the mental battle that's going on in your head.
So Jenny, go slowly. You've got the advice there. If you want any clarification on what me and Rachel just said, I've got a video on YouTube called How to Increase Your Calorie Ceiling. Watch that. It will teach you how to go slowly. But with anyone listening, look at the numbers. If you're unsure of what your calorie intake is doing and what your body is doing, sit down, work out where your BMR is, work out what you're eating right now, and look at the disparity. In Jenny's case, she's eating nearly 40% below her BMR. Now, how many of you are in a similar situation but haven't done the maths? And that's why you cannot eat at 40% below BMR calories and be healthy and function optimally. At fat loss, I start people at around 6 to 8% and then move it to like 10%. If they're really obese, I'll have a bigger calorie deficit because the body can handle it. It's got lots of energy reserves. But otherwise, you've got to take it slowly. So, Jenny needs to get to a point where she's at maintenance, then drops it kind of 6, 8, 10% and works back at her fat loss again. Right. Question number 2. Hi, Ben and Rachel. I love the show and all the information you two share, so thank you. My question is, I can never lose the belly jelly fat and my bingo wings. I'm a 49-year-old female that's been running for approximately 3 years. I'm currently training for a half marathon. I also have been going to the gym twice weekly to lift weights. So far, I've not noticed any body changes and becoming discouraged. I signed up for 3 half marathons, a sprint triathlon, and a Tough Mudder. I eat a clean diet of real foods, only consisting of mainly veggies, meat, eggs, some dairy, berries, and some fruits. Do you think, after all the required training, that I will see results? Thank you, Sandy from BC, Canada.
Where do I start? Again, this is quite a simple one, and it's one not to be made really complicated. And I think the first thing is that when we're looking at jelly belly fat and bingo wings, the first thing that comes to mind to me is, first of all, I mean, I have no idea of the weight of this lady, but she obviously sounds like a pretty experienced runner. So I'll just go with the fact that she is more of the, Sandy, please don't take this the wrong way, more of the skinny fat. So you are probably relatively small to normal build, but you probably don't have a lot of muscle on you. So what happens with your jelly belly, your jelly belly and your bingo wings, it feels very fat to you because you don't have enough muscle underneath to make it feel hard. And I know that sounds funny to all you guys out there, but to the chicks listening, I know they're going to relate to that. Women like to feel hard arms. Not really hard like man hard arms, but we like to feel nice firm arms on ourselves. We like to feel a nice firm tummy.
I think guys
what's that?
I think guys can feel the same. I think especially being a past obese individual and having like slightly looser skin, when I don't weight train for a period of time, my skin tone does change and I don't feel as buff, so to speak. So I think, men are definitely in there.
For sure. I'd say that guys, they like to feel hard arms. So exactly. Guys like to feel buff. Chicks like to feel, I hate to use the T word, but toned.
But,
they'll know what I mean.
We kind of diss this word toned. It kind of sums things up nicely, though.
It does a bit, yeah.
Toned, it kind of resonates with a lot of people. And I know the fitness industry sort of bash this word toned, but people know what it means. It resonates. So we should almost take the dogma away from it.
Exactly. Look, it's something that if somebody feels comfortable saying toned rather than building muscle and losing fat, I'm totally cool with that. That's fine. So anyway, us ladies like to feel toned, and what I would suggest is that perhaps she's not actually getting enough weight training in. So, Sunny, I would recommend that you do at least 3 weight training sessions a week, and make sure those weight training sessions are proper resistance training sessions. And by that, I mean you have enough rest between your sets and you're not trying to use it as a cardio workout. I know that you said that you do lift heavy weights, but a lot of runners are guilty of this. They basically chase that endorphin high that they get from cardio. So even though they're lifting, fairly decent weights, they're not getting enough reps out or time and attention because they're probably fatigued from the exercise prior, because they're trying to get that cardio effect. They're trying to get a sweat on. So really make sure that you are using effective weight training methods. So keeping your time and attention, you are having enough rest between sets. That would be the first thing I would suggest. The second thing that I would suggest is you're not eating enough. There is no mention of any carbohydrates in here. And as a runner, you need them, and you need a lot of them. So pre and post training nutrition would be essential, and that's something that I would definitely start with. I would definitely be making sure post training you have some form of a carb immediately post training and protein, and then the meal following that being also a high carb meal. Now, I would suggest that you would like to add in a few more carbohydrates during your day as well. Again, like we were talking about in the last question, running does churn a lot, and if you're that's serious recreational running. If you're doing 3 half marathons, a sprint triathlon, and Tough Mudder, that requires an awful lot of calories and an awful lot of carbohydrates to make sure that you can get through that training. So those are my 2 points. You need to be lifting more often, minimum 3 times a week, slowing down you're lifting, making sure that you're not getting a cardio effect from it. You want to basically feel a burn in your muscle. Make sure that you feed your muscle after training the appropriate nutrients, and overall add in more carbohydrates and actually potentially more calories into your diet so that you can grow some muscle. That's it. That's all I have.
I concur.
Cool.
Nothing else to add, Your Honour?
That's it. Nothing else.
Okay.
Next question.
Yes.
Are we going to switch roles now?
We're going to switch roles. Do a switch.
Okay. Okie dokie. This question is from James Mack. Hi, Ben. I love listening to your podcast, and I've just found it, and it's giving me loads of good information. In particular, I've just started reading Jonathan Bale's book, The Calorie Myth, which makes so much sense, and it's really easy to read. His use of examples are brilliant. As a bit of a background, I'm 28, I'm just shy of 6 foot and around 115 kilos, although I used to be over 130 kilos. I'm currently working with a trainer to get even lower and leaner. I usually stick to a paleo diet with the occasional white rice or sweet potato and do strength sessions, 2 LISS, so lower intensity, I think. I'm not quite sure what that stands for. And one sprint session per week.
Steady state.
Low intensity, steady state. Okay, that must be a British thing. I haven't seen it like that.
Oh.
Maybe I'm just completely blonde and I've missed that one. And one sprint session per week. I don't think my salt intake is high. I rarely add salt to my cooking or my meals. My question, and I apologise if you already answered this, I will try to find it if you have, is about constant thirst and a dry mouth. As long as I can remember, I've always drunk a lot of water, and I've never been a big juice or a soft drink fan. Although at uni and in the early years of working abroad, I would say that I did drink too much booze, but that's now limited to maybe a few nights a month. I think that the reason for this, if not the main reason, is that I feel constantly thirsty. I wake up in the middle of the night and I need a drink. The next morning I get up and I drink half a bottle of water before I've even moved, so about 750 mils. Through the day, I probably drink enough green tea and water to fill up 4 big bottles, so about 6 litres. I know we're supposed to drink as much water as possible, but it means very regular toilet breaks. I seem not to be able to go anywhere without needing to go to the toilet. The girlfriend makes a constant joke about being questioned if I need to go to the toilet if we're out, which I invariably do. And nearly every morning around 2 to 3 a.m. I get up because I need to go to the loo. As I have sat here writing this, I've had 4 swigs from my bottle, so maybe this shows you the amount that I drink. My dad has type 2 diabetes, but I've tested my blood sugars and are not elevated to indicate this. Could this be something hormonal in your opinion? What is particularly surprising is that my urine isn't always clear, despite the fact I've had 4 cups of green tea and almost a litre of water already today. It's 11:30 a.m. and it's still bright yellow. I'm constantly worrying, but any research I do seems to indicate a manner of all possible reasons, or none at all. Any help or advice you could give on the above would be much appreciated. James.
Yeah, this is a cool question. It kind of got me a little bit excited when I read it because it's a little bit different. And I think there's actually, when I first read this question, I was kind of going to go, you kind of need to go and see someone like a functional medicine practitioner to get to the kind of root cause of things. But upon reading this, I've changed my stance a lot purely because I've kind of almost pictured your lifestyle a bit more. I've kind of built you in my head as a client, which I would do. You know, if I was sat in a consultation with anyone, I would try and build a picture just by talking to the individual, looking at some notes, etc. Now, a lot of things stand out. Now, your adrenal glands are next to the thermostat that regulates hydration status and produces an important hormone called aldosterone that kind of regulates a lot of this kind of environment. Now, my first thing is I think you're too stressed. Partly because maybe your lifestyle is probably not to do with your training. Your training's kind of okay. I don't really know what your intensity is like. I also don't know your calorie status, so I'm not sure whether you're recovering well enough and getting enough carbohydrates on board. But I think you might be too stressed, and you also take on board an awful lot of caffeine. Now, green tea is great, it's healthy, but you drink a lot of it. You're drinking 4 cups before 11:30 a.m. in the morning. That's almost around 480 to 500 milligrams of coffee of caffeine already today. You know, most green teas contain about 80 to 120 milligrams. So it does depend on the strength of the tea bag, how long you stew it, all that kind of stuff. So let's just err on the side of caution and say it's 300 milligrams. You know, that's still 2 kind of coffees. That's still quite a lot of caffeine. So I think that's a problem. I also have no idea what your water quality is like, and that's going to play a huge role in whether your body will actually draw in water into the cells. So this is where electrolytes in water are really important. I've just moved into my new house and I'm really excited because I've just bought an Eva water filter, which cleanses my water just like running it through a volcano, basically, and then it's got all the electrolytes at the bottom. And people in the UK and probably other places, because I know this water is widely available, will agree with me that when you have a bottle of Fiji water, you know it's different. Like, you just taste that water and it's got magic in it. Well, the water system that I've just installed at home is just like that. It gives you essentially Fiji water. The water is so nice. So the simplest thing I can do is, I'm assuming you're drinking tap water. Take your tap water, put a tiny, tiny pinch of sea salt or Himalayan rock salt in it per litre, and start to drink that, because if you're drinking what I call naked water, it's just going to be passing straight through you. You need nearly twice as much fluid to hydrate a cell when it doesn't have any electrolytes in it, because it doesn't have an electronic charge. It doesn't pull it into the cells. So I think that's what you should work at, reducing stress. You also get up at 2 to 3 a.m., which is the classic time that people get up in the middle of the night when they have too much or too little cortisol in their bloodstream. So I think going away on that, you've actually got quite a lot to work on, and if it doesn't resolve itself, go and find someone far more intelligent than me and find an answer.
Just going back to November and December last year, I had a lot of work on my plate last year, and I knew I was very stressed at the time, but looking back, I was super stressed. I was constantly getting up wide awake between 2 a.m. and 3:30 every single morning, like so wide awake. I'd be lying there thinking, should I just get up now and just start doing my emails and then just go to training early? And that is your adrenals, and they are, it's the type of feeling you feel wide awake at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock at night. You then eventually fall asleep. You're then wide awake again, like literally bolt upright in bed at 2 a.m. in the morning. You eventually go back to sleep at about 3:30, 4 a.m. and only to have your alarm clock go off at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's not conducive to rest and relaxation and restorative sleep. So very stressful. And to be honest, the only way to get over that is to change your lifestyle. And it's I was lucky at the time. Obviously, I was overseas, so I was technically on a holiday. But it took about, I probably had about 3 months of three to 4 months of solid stress at the end of last year. It certainly took a good sort of four weeks before I was sleeping properly through the night again, with a lot of phosphatidylserine, magnesium, and a few other things to calm me down. I've got this tea, actually. I can't remember what it's called. I'll have to find it out for you. It's some magic tea person at the tea shop gave it to me. I have no idea what's in it. Perhaps I shouldn't declare that on a podcast. No, it was in a mall here, so it was fine. It's legal.
That's not a well-known chain in England. The magic tea shop with the magic tea. Yeah,
no, it was one from T2. Like, that brand T2?
Yeah, I like them.
I think it's called Sleepy Time or something like that. I don't know. I'll have to look. I'll tell you on the next podcast. Anyway, I digress. Next question. Who is this question from? Let's have a look. This question is from Rachel in Kingston, Canada. Hi there, Ben and Rachel. Firstly, let me thank you. Let me start by, like many others, by saying that this show is very helpful to me, and I've listened to many episodes and learned so much. Thank you for doing what you do. I would like to ask a question that began with me actually answering a question of yours, Ben. You asked your Instagram followers if anything has ever kept them from their normal workout routine, and said that you simply need to adapt your training around your injury or issue. I replied with a blurb about my high cortisol and issues about actually gaining weight whilst trying to cut back on my calories, increasing my activity levels, and how this has caused me to stop training at the intensities I'm used to and that I love. You replied ever so graciously that I should not be eating in a deficit until completely healed. A little bit of background before I get into the questions. I've been trying to lose fat for the past 2+ years. I'm 29 years old and I had my fourth baby 2.5 years ago. I started with mostly cardio and I did do weight training, but I also did a lot of cardio via various at-home workouts. I lost 35 pounds in the first year and I have not budged on the scale in the past year and a half unless it's to climb upwards, not down. I first noticed that whenever I took complete rest and a recovery week, I would lose weight. Then and only then I would lose it and I would not return, and it would not return until I began exercising again. I moved on from a lot of cardio and I started to do a lot of strength training, such as bodybuilding style workouts, and then 12 weeks of strong lifts 5x5. Eventually, no losses were to be seen. Now, when I exercise and diet, I gain weight. This is incredibly frustrating. I'm approximately 26% body fat, 146 pounds, and 5'4". I have a fair amount of muscle, but I also have a fair amount of pudge. I think that with all the pregnancies, training 6 to 7 days a week for months on end, and a very high stress lifestyle of a grad student, homeschooling a family of 6, I've ruined myself. God, I can feel the stress of this lady already. Sorry, I digress. I'm actually pretty scared, and my doctor is of no help. She has told me that my tests show high cortisol, 119 out of a max of 719 out of a max of 720 for the upper limit. I've tried limiting cardio, taking exercise breaks, and an elimination diet due to new gastrointestinal issues arising. I still have these problems. So my questions are these. What sort of diet and exercise program should I attempt to do whilst trying to recover? I've currently been doing a kettlebell circuit 3 to 4 days a week and trying to integrate more yoga and foam rolling. The diet portion is beyond me. I've tried everything and now I have no idea what to do. How do I know when I'm healed and what happens then? In your opinion, is there any way I will ever be able to lose fat and get closer to the 20% body fat I would love to have? Or am I stuck forever struggling to maintain this set point? Any help would be gratefully appreciated. Rachel.
Now this question kind of comes back a bit to question 1, but I'm going to package it in a different way. So if you want to do this with me, you can do. Right, so get out a piece of paper and a pen and draw a circle in the middle of your piece of paper. And let's write 1600, okay? So we're going to hypothesize that Rachel, who's just written this question, is on 1600 calories. And we're going to hypothesize that she's just taken her rest week. So this circle in the middle of the paper with 1600 calories in it is her resting and losing weight, which she said she does. When she rests and relaxes, she loses weight. So let's say she eats 1600 calories as her normal regime on a rested, and she loses weight. Now when she goes on a diet and exercise kick, she increases her calorie output and reduces her calorie output. So now draw an arrow left away from this circle and let's put 400 calories on top of that arrow. Now draw an arrow in the opposite direction and write 400 calories via diet. So we've got Rachel hypothetically on 1600 calories who's just now started exercising and burning 400 calories per day. And because she's going on a diet, she's constantly consciously eating less as well. That makes a total of 800 calories. You can now do the maths. She's now halved her calorie intake because of her new regime. And this is kind of where we as individuals need to be very critical and need to be aware of the numbers, because without knowing the numbers, you don't know what on earth you're doing. So credit to Rachel, she's doing everything that she feels right. She feels like she's doing the right thing. She's starting to exercise and she's starting to eat less, etc., etc. But the problem is, without knowing to what extent and to what gravity, it's just guesswork. So Rachel already knows that if she rests and eats her normal diet, she will lose weight. So she is likely at rest at 1600 calories on a very low to moderate deficit. Let's say 10%. Okay, so to increase her body composition, she should probably stay on the same calorie deficit but exercise. Now, to stay on the same calorie deficit, that means she needs to add calories into her diet. So if she's burning 400 calories in an exercise session, and let's say she's doing let's just say she's doing a bodybuilding upper body program, and she's burning 400 calories. She needs to stay on 600 calories plus 400, so she now needs to be on 2,000 calories to lose weight and change her body composition. And hopefully she's obviously going to tone up, have a bit of a metabolic response, and start to change her body shape as a result of the training. So, Rachel, you kind of need to take what I've said in just then and what me and Rachel have talked about in question 1 and take things back to basics. You need to know how many calories your body needs. You need to know what your exercise is taking out of your body, what severity you're going on a diet, and you need to build yourself back up again. It sounds like you're very stressed as well. You've obviously got a busy home life, you've got kids running around, you've probably got a job to juggle as well, etc. So you need to bear all this kind of stuff in mind. So you need to take this slowly. Running around, doing all this stuff, it's probably counterproductive. But like Rachel said earlier, if you want to exercise loads, you need to eat loads. Because you've still got to account for that energy demand. More is not better. If I go out and run a marathon and don't eat, couple of days later, I'm going to be in a bad way. It's going to take out a lot of energy reserves from my body to recover from that because I'm not really replacing it or putting it back in. So sit down, work through the numbers, find your actual set points and find how many calories you need. All I would work on for the moment is finding out where your body is best at rest. So get in your body to eat as many calories as possible without gaining weight and without doing too much exercise, and then start on a moderate deficit. And that moderate deficit for me would probably be you starting to do some exercise again. Just going into the gym and doing some simple weight workouts that burn about 250, 300 calories, and that will be your deficit. So you don't change your diet, you just bring on board the exercise. And I think here it's just a simple case of not allowing your body enough rest, really getting stuck back into training and dieting after your pregnancies and just not knowing where your body is.
I think that something that might help you, Rachel, is that you've obviously allocated this time to exercise on a daily basis. Now, if you completely remove all of those training times, you're going to feel a little bit lost and second guess yourself. So what I would suggest is that you start off by reducing down to, 4 training sessions a week, and perhaps having 2 of those training sessions as weight training sessions, and the other 2 you just go for a walk and nothing else. So 2 weight training, 2 walking. And it sounds like, this is a case that, we haven't really talked a lot about metabolic damage on the show before, but this would be a particular case that if you were my client, this is something that I would certainly be looking at. And look, we manage it the same way, so we can name it what we want to, but your adrenals are, your adrenals are suffering. So we need to give your adrenals a bit of love, a bit of rest and relaxation, but do it slowly. Just think to yourself, right, I'm still going to be training 4 times this week, 2 of which are going to be weight training, and they're going to be short sessions, and the other 2 sessions were going to be walks. And really consider those walks as training sessions. It's part of training your mind, it's part of training your body. You're moving, but you're not expending a huge amount of calories, and that's the difference. We have to now think of training as more nourishing rather than punishment for yourself.
I think there's a huge amount of really valuable lessons for people in this podcast. Actually, I was reading through the questions and I was actually unsure of how the podcast will pan out as a result of almost like the basic point. But I think whether you're a personal trainer listening to this podcast, you're someone confused with their diet, or you're someone knowledgeable, I think we've kind of filled in some really good gaps from past podcasts here on how we need to be self-critical and how we actually go back and look at the numbers. Calories are very important. The protein requirement that you eat is very important. Training is very important as well, but you can't do too much. You can't overburden yourself. I said on a previous podcast, if anything, try and be slightly undertrained more than slightly overtrained, because being slightly overtrained freaking sucks. Your well-being goes down, your libido go down, your sleep sucks. But when you're slightly undertrained, like, what's the worst that can happen? You might not quite be as big or ripped or whatever as possible, but your vitality will be as good. You will feel on top of the world, and it's something that I've changed tact of this year. I know that I've got a lot of things happening in my lifestyle at the moment. I'm starting new ventures. I'm bringing new coaches on board. I'm moving house. There's a lot of change, so I'm just training 3 times a week. That's it. There's no pressure on myself. It's easy to get in. I'm maintaining my body composition. I'm feeling good, and more importantly for me, when I turn up for a rugby game on a Saturday, I actually feel really, really fresh, like mega fresh. Like, I'm really on top of my game because I've actually rested an awful lot and not put my body under too much stress.
Minimal effective dose.
Boom.
That's what you need. Minimal effective dose. And I say that to my girls who are in any of my online programs is, a couple of them say to me, oh my God, that workout smashed me. I'm like, that's great. And they said, but, the workout that we do on Tuesdays isn't as hard. And I say, yeah, you don't have to go balls to wall every workout, because I can tell you now, if you went balls to wall every workout, you'd soon get very tired and you would lose motivation to go. So minimal effective dose with your training and take care of your nutrition.
And this is actually where people have ended up damaging themselves a lot, even in the fitness industry as coaches and trainers, where we are seen as the people that need to go hard or go home and smash every workout and have an amazing leg day and get a massive chest pump and all, which is great. But years and years of repetition of that leads people to seek a way to get that same stimulus. The body can't always respond and be linear, and this is where I think people fall into the trap of ending up consuming too much coffee, taking strong pre-workouts, and relying on other things to create an environment that you used to have when you were fresh and in your game. You think about when you first started training, you had lots of natural energy, you didn't overtrain, you were in a good place stress-wise, and then as your training career progresses and you train really hard, perhaps your body is constantly overtrained. So when you try and elicit and get that, that big leg day again, to get that, you have to take, you have to have already had 3 cups of coffee. You have to have already had X pre-workout or whatever. And I think this is where the fitness industry and some coaches have shot themselves in the foot, because they have sought this expectation that this is how you should train every session, and it's just not true. So let's treat the body with a little bit of balance, people. Rachel, thank you for being on the show again. Amazing input as always. You can check Rachel
for having me
out at athleticfox.com. She's also on Facebook, Rachel Guy. She's on Twitter, Athletic Fox. I am everywhere as Ben Coomber. I know Instagram came up today, and I haven't mentioned Instagram before. I am on Instagram as well. Don't post that often, but I try and be interesting when I do. I think my last post since recording this podcast was some kind of massive egg monstrosity that my girlfriend cooked me, and that spurred a lot of conversation about recipes and stuff. So I do post a lot of food related stuff on Instagram. But it seems to be one of those cool things to do, and I do a lot of food related stuff. If you've enjoyed the show, which I think people are going to have enjoyed the show, and I think it's going to help a lot of people, do please share this podcast. If you know someone that's struggling in some capacity with their diet, send them this link. They don't have to listen to any other podcast. Just say, listen to this show, and then maybe redirect them back to episode 117, where I talk about setting up a basic diet, and it should really help them. And then if you have enjoyed the show, please leave a tune. Don't leave a tune, because I bet a lot of you can't sing. Please leave a review on iTunes and on Stitcher, and give us a shout on Facebook and Twitter when the show goes live. Me and Rachel will not be on the show next week. I think next week's show is Dan John, but I will need to check that. Very exciting show, very knowledgeable coach from America. But that is goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
And we
see you in 2 weeks.
See you all in 2 weeks' time. Ciao.
Ciao.
Hey everyone, Ben Cooper Radio, episode number 123, if my maths serves me correctly. Now, we are international again. I'm staying up late. I'm interviewing a man that is very much in the medical realm.